Your eyes and your vision are under attack, damaging blue light from the sun. Your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromicelle technology.
The All Eyes Visual VRP is a portable vision testing platform that includes visual fields, acuity, color vision testing, pupillometry, and extraocular motility. The visual leverages virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and augmented technologies to enable eye care providers to test for and monitor common eye diseases. Visit alleyes.com for more information. With more screen usage and indoor time, myopia, also known as nearsightedness, is increasing and getting worse in children. Now, certified eye doctors can prescribe MiSight One Day, the first and only FDA-approved soft contact lens to slow myopia progression in age-appropriate children. Visit CooperVision.com to find a Brilliant Futures certified eye doctor near you. Do your patients know what presbyopia is?
There are people who are afraid of the press.
Have you talked to your patients about multifocal contact lenses?
I've heard the bifocal, but not multifocal.
Exactly, not multifocal.
Do you need help with your multifocal strategy? Learn more at the conclusion of this episode. Hello and welcome to the Open Your Eyes podcast. I'm Dr. Kerry Geld, the host of the documentary Open Your Eyes. If you're new here and you like our interviews, press like, subscribe, share, and hit the bell to get notifications of great new interviews. Also, please leave comments. Great news, you can now watch our full-length documentary Open Your Eyes on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube movies and shows. Omega-3s are an essential fat that's needed to survive. Humans must consume omega-3s from food because we cannot manufacture it. Studies show DHA and EPA found in omega-3s have powerful health benefits for the eyes, brain, heart, and other body systems. Today's guest, internist Marina Green, MD. Dr. Green also holds a PhD in micronutrients and targeted nutrition. Her micronutrient research focuses on carotenoid and omega-3s and how it benefits visual function and cognitive performance. Dr. Green, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Carrie.
It's so nice to see you, and I really appreciate, omega-3s is a very highly studied drug in medicine. I've seen places where it's approximately the 5th most studied drug in medicine. And it gets kind of confusing because there's an alphabet soup to essential fatty acids. So let's start off with omega-3s and the different types of omega-3s, EPA, DHA, ALA. So if you could give us a little insight on that.
Absolutely. Carrie, first of all, thank you for having me here. And it's through a series of research and evidence that we've reached this level of knowledge. I started getting into the area of omegas because of my PhD. Even though it wasn't focused on omegas, it was focused on carotenoids for as micronutrients for metabolism, particularly eye function. I realized how important the addition of omegas into our diets and into our wellness they are for human function. So omegas, like you said before, are a certain type of fatty acids, and they are exclusive because we cannot produce them. They have something that is called a double bond, so that's why they're unsaturated compared to saturated fats. So very generic and very briefly, you have 2 different types of fats: the saturated, which we all know are bad for you, like butter and those kind of very solid fats, versus unsaturated fats, and that's where the omegas come in. They're called omegas because they bend into this omega shape of the Greek letter, and they have double bonds, which by definition that makes them called unsaturated. And depending on the place where the double bond is, you have then omega-3, which occurs in the 3rd carbon, omega-6, which occurs in the 6th carbon, and omega-9, which occurs in the 9th carbon. Omega-3s and omega-6 are very important for us. They're essential polyunsaturated fatty acids, but particularly omega-3s are very relevant because we don't get enough of them throughout our diets.
So tell me about ALA. What is ALA? And then we'll get into DHA and EPA.
ALA is alpha linoleic acid. It's a very common fatty acid in our diet. It's very abundant in seeds, particularly flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, and that's why they're in this new era of this trendy nutrition for getting into more seeds is so important. And it's a very important molecule because from there, the body can then form the next 2 molecules, which are the other 2 very important omega-3s, EPA and DHA, eicosapentaenoic acid for EPA and docosapentaenoic acid for DHA. So they are in the same metabolism of fatty acids. The first molecule to appear is ALA, and that's why it's so important. And then the body can break it down and keep adding, elongating the molecule to become a very long chain, and then into an EPA molecule, and further down the series of metabolisms into DHA.
So ALA is mostly from plants, and only a small amount can be converted to DHA and EPA, maybe 5%. Is that correct?
Correct. So that's another key here, and why omega-3s, particularly EPA and DHA, become so relevant. Even though the organism, our organism, or human beings, are able to convert ALA into the other 2 molecules that are relevant, the process is not efficient enough, and it's not enough. So we don't get enough ALA to transform it all into DHA and EPA, even though we do get enough amounts throughout our diet. The process is not efficient enough to convert into enough concentrations, circulating concentrations for our body to metabolize and use DHA and EPA.
And we do use ALA, and we use it for energy. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, see, the thing with fatty acids is that the key of life is thanks to fatty acids, and that's the development or the creation of the cell membrane. Thanks to that compartmentalization is why life happens. And cell membranes are made of fatty acids, they are made of lipids. And when you have a cell membrane with embedded omega-3s, it allows it to be more flexible. It allows it to have more structure and fight oxidation and other processes in a better form than if it didn't have it. So ALA, DHA, and EPA are everywhere in our body. They are highly concentrated in areas with higher metabolic rates, for example, the brain or the heart, and hence probably we'll eventually start talking about health claims and why they are important for us. But the biological rationale physiologically is because they are highly deposited in these very important organs to produce function throughout high metabolic rates, particularly, for example, the brain, where they are highly concentrated to protect the nerves and the neurons and the cells that protect the neurons. So ALA is present as well in all these different organs.
So when we look at DHA and EPA, we get them from animal products such as fatty fish. Explain to me about DHA and what's the importance of DHA, and then we'll move to EPA. And I'm glad you could pronounce what they stand for.
Yeah. So EPA is eicosapentaenoic acid. DHA is docosapentaenoic acid. We can just stay to You can just say stick to EPA and DHA. If you want to start talking about DHA first.
Yes, please.
Because it's not that abundant in our diet, we probably most exclusively obtain it from, like you said, fish sources, and specifically oily fish. Like if you have cod, it's not going to have DHA at all. So we're talking about tuna, sardines, salmon, and probably the best of them all would be mackerel, that will have over 3 grams of DHA. And for people that are vegan, for example, you can, and vegetarians can obtain their sources from algal oil. And having said that, the reason why oily fish have high concentrations of DHA and EPA is because, or particularly DHA, is because they obtain their main source of nutrient is algae. So going back to the origins, algae are the main producers of omega-3s.
So so DHA, where does it typically accumulate in the body?
DHA, like I've said, see, it's like we at the end of the day, Carrie, are building blocks of nutrition. So DHA, every single nutrient and every single compound is spread out our organism in every single cell. But particularly it's been found in higher concentrations, for example, in liver, in the heart, in the nerves, and in the brain, in the back of the eye, which your viewers probably would be more familiar, the retina, and in the macula. Particularly, the DHA can embed itself in photoreceptors in the membrane. And bringing back the conversation about carotenoids, because that's my area of expertise, carotenoids protect DHA. So that's why carotenoids are so important in the macula for the photoreceptors, because they protect DHA from oxidation, because it's a very fragile molecule, and it allows carotenoids allow for DHA to do its actions for the photoreceptor. So it's like a synergistic effect there. And that's not the only, sorry.
And I was going to say, an EPA and inflammation. Can you tell us about that?
EPA and inflammation are linked as an anti-inflammatory. So that has to go back with other fatty acids, for example, the prostaglandins and other pro-inflammatory molecules. EPA controls the exaggerated inflammatory response by helping the molecules to kind of controlling the exponential process of inflammation.
So just to get all the fatty acids and the fatty acids straight, let's talk about, even though this is going to be mostly about omega-3s, this, for completeness, if you could explain what omega-6s are, and if you could help us with that and the difference between omega-6 and omega-3, omega-6 also being an essential fatty acid and having some benefits as well, whether it's heart health or to decrease insulin resistance in the right amount. And if you could talk about CLA and GLA and ARA and LA, but let's start off with omega-3s and LA, if we could.
Omega-6 and LA, linoleic, because, sorry, so we have ALA, alpha linoleic acid, and then you have omega-6, which is linoleic acid, LA.
Right, without the N.
Yeah, exactly, sorry. So LA, linoleic acid, which is one kind of the most abundant types of omega-6, would be particularly found in nuts, like cashew nuts or peanuts, all those types of very oily nuts. It's also contained in avocado, sunflower oil. and other types of vegetable oils as well. The problem here with, and it's very important as well, so they are a series of, fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acids play important roles in the body. We cannot just exclusively talk about one without the other, because again, we're built with nutrition, and everything takes its own place. I think the problem that we are having at the moment is that we want to separate things from each other and just look at one molecule, rather than looking at the whole approach of nutrition. Because if you're going to eat avocado with nuts, for example, it's going to have all the different elements of the different fatty acids. So omega-6 are important as well. There are a few studies that have proven positive effects for inflammation, but what science is saying at the moment is that we have to look at the omega-6 omega-3 ratio, which it has to do with our nutrition. So higher concentrations of omega-6 eventually will become negative, will have negative effects for human health, particularly cardiovascular and metabolic health.
And omega-6, because of the anti-inflammatory or inflammatory components, it also has some anti-inflammatory when you're looking at the GLA, evening primrose oil or borage oil, that could be very beneficial. If you could speak a little bit to that.
That wouldn't be my area, Carrie. I would be focused particularly on omega, not on omega-6 at all, just on a more of a practical therapeutic process with patients in clinical practice, and kind of a very general overview of omega-6 and omega-9. Omega-6 have become relevant because of what you just said there. They have they've important properties to cellular metabolism and anti-inflammation. But when you have higher concentrations of omega-6, and that's when you have a diet high in fatty acids, or you have more of a Western diet, you flip the ratio. So that means that you're not having enough omega-3s and you're having a lot of omega-6, and that's when pro-inflammatory actions take place, particularly mechanisms of action and how omega-6 on their own with these oils have their different effects. I wouldn't know, that wouldn't be my area of expertise, but related to application and its link with nutrition and wellness, that's the key, that when you invert and you start having more of omega-6 intake rather than omega-3, or in a balanced way, that's when you flip the mechanism, the effects, and they start to become negative. So just briefly to explain history, ages before, we used to have a ratio 1-to-1, so which means we used to eat as much omega-3s as we used to eat omega-6. So our diet was balanced in that sense, and now it has flipped in that some cases you have a ratio of 20-to-1, so too much omega-6 in relation to omega-3 intake. Again, that doesn't mean that just taking it exclusively like that, omega-6 is bad. Omega-6 is bad in higher concentrations, and when you don't balance that out with the omega-3.
So I guess it comes from we're eating too many processed foods with inflammatory oils that's raising that ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. We want a 4-to-1 ratio down to a 1-to-1 ratio, like in the Paleolithic times, but we're at like 20 to 40 to 1. And of course, when we have that big, when it's out of balance like that, we increase our risk of all inflammatory type diseases, inflammation being the core component of chronic disease. So we're looking at an increased risk of insulin resistance that could lead to diabetes, et cetera. Now, if you could just real quick, omega-9s, and then we're going to concentrate on omega-3s, but just tell us a little bit what omega-9s are, and we could get this alphabet soup out of the way.
Omega-9s, again, very briefly, they are fatty acids that have their double bond located at the 9th carbon after from the start of the chain, the carbon chain. They are monounsaturated, they just have that double bond. And the most common of omega-9 would be olive oil. And as everybody knows, olive oil is it's part of the Mediterranean diet, and the Mediterranean diet has been proven one of the best diets in the world, particularly for primary prevention in cardiometabolic diseases such as diabetes, obesity, cholesterol, etc., and cancer included in those cardiometabolic diseases. And you have the other now trendy oils such as avocado oil or the nuts oil.
Yeah, cashew oil. What do you think about avocado oil and olive oil for cooking?
Yeah, we always get that question. Probably a nutritionist would be more detailed on that, but as a medical doctor, I can tell you that, and with my background in nutrition, both of them are brilliant. You can use them for your diet, but as we all know, if we cook oil to a certain temperature, the double bond will break down, and it'll just turn to a normal saturated oil, as if you would be cooking with the normal oil. So ideally, now to what temperature and for how long? So we're talking here about more specifics on the cooking. So for how long are you cooking with that oil, and how high the temperature is? If you're going to deep fried chips, or as we call them chips over here in this world, you call them French fries. Yeah, it's going to be exactly the same thing. So if you're going to use that oil, it's better to use it raw as a dressing for salads, or for putting on the soup, but not particularly for cooking.
And do you have a favorite oil for cooking? Is it coconut oil, or is there any type of?
I do cook with olive oil. I do everything with olive oil.
With olive oil, and you usually try to do it at low heat.
Yes, and I avoid all types of deep fried food. And if I'm going to have deep fried food, I'm just going to go all in. There's no point in doing it half, because at the end of the day, if you cook, if you overheat olive oil, or these monosaturated oils will turn into normal saturated oil.
And some of these oils are not just only omega-6 or monounsaturated. They have omega-6s in it, not just omega-9s, but they cross over, and they'll have other types of properties as well. Like peanut oil, is considered omega-9, but it has a lot of omega-6, so that would be considered more of an inflammatory oil. Would you agree with that?
Again, I think it very depends on how much we're going to have of the omega-6. Omega-6, I don't want to say that they're bad and pro-inflammatory. Sorry, am I confused? I got confused there. Did you say pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory?
Well, something like peanut oil has more omega-6 and would be more pro-inflammatory.
Yeah, that's what I heard then. If you don't have a balanced diet and you are overeating omega-6, it will be pro-inflammatory. It will be negative, yes, because we have omega-6 are enough in our diet. Like if you have a normal diet, you have enough of omega-6, and if you overeat these in general a diet or these oils, then you will have the negative effects, the pro-inflammatory effects of omega-6.
So let's get back to omega-3s. These fatty acids are found in fish, and some fish have more omega-3s than other fish. Why is that? Why do some fish have more omega-3s percentage compared to other fish?
I don't know, Carrie. I know particularly that farmed fish, farmed salmon, for example, has higher concentrations because their diet is provided in a very controlled manner and is already high in omegas where they take it from. And hence why they end up with higher concentrations of DHA. But both DHA and EPA. But I wouldn't know, probably because of the type of algae they consume or the region of the area of the earth where they come from.
And there's been a rage now of omega-3 fish oil versus krill oil. Can you make a comment about krill oil?
No, Carrie, sorry.
That-
No, I want to know
that's not. Now, in Ireland, with different types of omega oils, we in the United States, we have prescription omega oil, Lavazza and Vasipa. Is that something that you're familiar with at all?
Not with commercial names, no. There are different reasons why we prescribe omega-3 particularly, and one of the most established ones is for high triglycerides. When triglycerides are really high in blood, that's a very well-known recommendation for years now, that fish oil, but high concentrations, we're talking at a dosage of at least 3 grams per day for triglycerides over 500 milligrams per milliliter, so per deciliter in blood. So the problem that we have is that in the market, there's so many supplements that are not properly policed, certified or registered, but that they don't show exactly in their label what are they selling. So if you're just taking 1 gram of fish oil, that gram of fish oil can contain a lot of different fatty acids and not enough DHA and EPA. So regardless, I know, for example, in the US, TG omega-3 is a good supplement in terms of high concentrations, and it fully discloses exactly what type of concentrations you're getting for omega, or DHA and EPA, and you're getting both, which is very important, not just taking one molecule on its own.
The All Eyes Visual Oil VRP is a portable vision testing platform that includes visual fields, acuity, color vision testing, pupillometry, and extraocular motility. The visual leverages virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and augmented technologies to enable eye care providers to test for and monitor common eye diseases. Visit alleyes.com for more information.
MacuHealth, your science-born and tested solutions for visual performance, macular degeneration, and dry eye syndrome. New products coming soon. Embrace the science.
So you mentioned triglyceride. Can you explain the difference between ethyl ester omega-3s versus triglyceride?
Ethyl ester omega-3s.
Yes. So in the United States, like Lavazza, Vasipa, which are prescription, or some of the cheaper omega-3s, they're considered ethyl ester versus triglyceride omega-3.
Is that the
I'm sorry, Lavazza, Vasipa are ethyl ester omega-3s instead of triglyceride. Is that something that you look into, the different forms of omega-3s?
I wouldn't know, Carrie. No. Usually it's DHA and EPA as the best omegas you can get would be EPA and DHA. Now, there are different types of extraction. Some of them are purified. Some of them are just the fish oil.
Yes. Okay. Talk about, we call it ethyl ester and triglycerides, but talk about the extraction part, if you could.
It's not my area of expertise, Carrie. I'm more into the practical application and the uses, and more of the holistic approach with nutrition as having omegas as a very important part of it. The extraction process is like everything, they have its chemicals to break down the fish oil and the extraction process to obtain the purified molecule versus leaving the fish oil, the gram of fish oil with all the different molecules that compose fish oil or that fish have.
Okay, let's talk about the practical side of it, health studies and omega-3s, and you mentioned triglycerides. Just give us a little bit more insight about how omega-3s could affect triglycerides, and does it affect cholesterol?
So when our intake of EHA and EPA increases, the whole metabolism of lipids change. So certain molecules, good cholesterol and bad cholesterol are influenced by the presence of good fats and bad fats. So you have saturated fats, which are the bad fats, and polyunsaturated fats, which are the good fats. And in with like low density lipoprotein is the LDL, that's the bad one, and high density lipoprotein, HDL, would be the good cholesterol for or patients are familiar with that name. And when you have higher concentrations, and then you have the third component, which are triglycerides. Triglycerides can be free in blood, and at higher levels of triglycerides, it can cause a lot of damage, particularly, for example, pancreatitis. And when omega-3s start, DHA and EPA start circulating in the blood, they change hepatic metabolism to kind of grab the triglycerides, transform them into other molecules, free fatty acids. They kind of break them down into the components.
So Marina, Dr. Green, I want you to go over how omega-3s can help preventing chronic disease. And if you could go over why we're getting chronic disease and how much our diet has to do with it. And I know in the United States, at least, we have about 63% of our diet is processed foods. So I know you have some slides that you could share with us. I appreciate that. If you could go through those.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, that's I think that's a good place to start. And then from our diseases, move into our nutrition, and then to start looking into particular molecules like omegas and why they are so important. What I'm presenting here is a couple of studies that have proven how important our nutrition is and the impact they have in our current health problems. So the reason why we're dying worldwide is because of cardiometabolic diseases. And specifically, I'm talking about diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular diseases such as strokes or coronary heart disease. And the main contributing factor for these diseases to develop is nutrition. So as we can see here, if we consume more salt in our diets, or if we consume low nuts and low seeds, low concentrations, low levels of nuts and seeds, if we consume high processed meats, all of these factors will lead to the development of these cardiovascular and cardiometabolic diseases. We have here, like, as we were talking about omegas, low seafood omega-3 fats are a very important contributing factor for cardiometabolic diseases. And on the other side, I'm presenting, on the left-hand side of the screen, I'm presenting a study from the Lancet, the Eat Lancet Commission, a more recent study, where they show that, again, our nutrition, we are not eating enough of the foods that we need, and we're eating too much of foods that we don't need. So they found through a series of epidemiological studies and a big consortium of different countries, They showed in their results that we're eating too much red meat, for example, and animal origin foods, and we're not eating enough of what we need, like fish. Back again to the conversation of omegas, not enough vegetables and not enough fruits. And they consider this as being our greatest challenge in our current century, because of the importance of nutrition on the development of cardiometabolic diseases, and these being the main cause of death in the world.
Are you concerned at all with fish when it comes to the mercury content because of the pollution in the oceans?
Yeah, there's definitely a big problem on mercury, probably a bit or somewhat controlled with farmed fish, and then we get into the ethical considerations of farm fish. I think everything has a knockdown effect on the ethical considerations and the danger we're leaving. It's a big concern, the contamination of the oceans and how that's affecting our nutrition in turn. Because if we are giving the idea to the public to eat more fish, there is a concern of mercury toxicity. Now, having said that, I haven't seen a patient with mercury toxicity throughout my practice, nor I have heard of my other colleagues treating toxicity by mercury.
So would you be more inclined to recommend smaller fish? Because, maybe from where you are in Ireland, it's not as much of a consideration, but I think in the United States, mercury toxicity is something that we have to consider. So would you be more like, are we better off eating smaller fish? Should we be eating fish every day or maybe only a couple times a week because of the mercury problems and other contaminants? I'm talking from the United States, and I know you're not in the United States, but I was wondering if you and your colleagues who think about this and give this a lot of thought, if it's something that you consider.
That's a very good point. Not really, Carrie, because it is not a concern here realistically. I do know that farmed fish is more controlled in that manner, that they have higher they have a kind of a better diet, and it's a more controlled environment. Regarding the recommendations for fish, that's a difficult area because not many people would be able to eat the enough amounts of the concentrations required, whether that's because of economic resources, time in their lifestyle. People are allergic to fish, people don't like fish, and then this consideration about environmental factors with intoxication or contamination of the waters. I wouldn't know specifically eat less or eat more. I think that's when probably the recommendation for targeted nutrition comes in place, which is supplementing with proper omega-3 supplements to balance that out.
And I think where you are in the world, I think, especially here in the US, I think it's important if you do eat a lot of fish, especially if you're eating bigger fish, that you do get your mercury levels checked and look for symptoms of mercury toxicity, such as, poor memory, poor sleep, and those type of things. Yeah.
And then also consider then obtaining your sources of omega-3 being not only from fish, but also from supplementation.
Yes. Thank you.
So moving on, I just put in this slide, Carrie, to link the reason why I started to be interested and what happened with the omegas and why we started looking into omegas. And it started with my PhD. We were looking into the xanthophyll carotenoids, particularly lutein, mesoxyxanthin, and xanthophyll, and how different formulations would have a different effect in the body in terms of serum concentrations and the concentrations that accumulate in the retina, in the macula particularly.
So if we're looking at carotenoids, if you could explain how carotenoids help protect the omegas, and as far as oxidative stress or rusting, why that's important.
Sure. So the same as the omegas, DHA and EPA, particularly if I want to talk about the eye, DHA is the most important molecule that accumulates in the cell membranes of the photoreceptors. The carotenoids, the xanthophyll carotenoids, do exactly the same thing. Lutein, mesoxanthin, and zeaxanthin also insert themselves within the cell membrane, and they're very close to the omegas. And what they do, it's thanks to their chemical properties. They also are unsaturated, which means they also have double bonds, and they have many double bonds that allows their structure to twist and to have a very interesting structure to insert themselves in the membrane and make it more soluble, but also their double bonds are allowed to grab the free radicals. So we are constantly exposed to oxidative stress, like you said, from our lifestyle, stress, UV light, like normal light exposure, high concentrations of saturated fats in our diet. All these stressors are going to affect the functionality of the cell, and that's through oxidation, the famous oxidative stress, and that's given by free radicals. And these free radicals are effectively grabbed or quenched by the carotenoids. And instead of these free radicals affecting the omegas by changing their structure or removing the only double bond that they might have, and started making a more of a saturated fat rather than a non-saturated fat, that free radical is eliminated by that carotenoid. So that's how that's how carotenoids protect the omegas, and then they allow in turn to maintain a healthier photoreceptor.
So we need a good balance of omegas. We need a good balance of carotenoids. But what happens if somebody has a lot of carotenoids, but no omegas, or a lot of omegas and not enough carotenoids? Which seems to be more protective?
Yeah, good question, Gary. I think that when we're talking about which one is best, it's always important to have both and the synergistic effect that they have. But in terms of protection for the photoreceptor, by far the xanthophyll carotenoids are the most important molecules. The photoreceptors, like Professor Joan Nolans like to call them, they're like the sunscreen of the eye. They protect not only from free radicals, but also protect from blue light. They by absorbing the photons, they also protect from other anti-inflammatory processes. So in terms of, if we want to talk about protection, the carotenoids are the stars of the movie, whereas the omegas, DHA particularly, would be more of a functional molecule that will allow the cell to have stability, to have a better metabolism, a better strength in its cell membrane rather than protection.
If you could also talk about, as an internist, the carotenoids in other parts of the body. We're eye doctors, and we like to think about carotenoids in the macula and preventing macular degeneration or decreasing the risk of macular degeneration or cataracts. But how about heart, cancer? What are you researchers looking at as far as helping protect the heart and maybe preventing against some cancers with carotenoids?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that question is very timely, Carrie, given that we want to look for more other molecules that can give us benefits and provide a better health. Besides the functions that you've mentioned about carotenoids, they also, I'd like to just mention there about their properties for improving vision and cognition. And that's when I'm going to link it then to the brain. So carotenoids have also been found in specific areas, obviously the visual area in the brain, but also other areas spread out in the brain. And hence why there's a lot of hypotheses that intervention with carotenoids in the elderly population can improve cognition or improve certain aspects of cognition, particularly memory or working memory. Small trials have proven that in the elderly, intervention with carotenoids and omegas have a very positive effect in cognition. Now, other areas of the body, for example, cancer, there are particularly two main cancers, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, patients that have higher concentrations or have a better diet and hence higher intake of carotenoids, of lutein and zeaxanthin, have a protective factor for non-Hodgkin lymphoma and breast cancer. Those are kind of the two main cancers that have been looked into. Some studies have shown some efficacy in prostate cancer. And then you have other carotenoids like astaxanthin, that's a very important molecule for cardiovascular diseases. Also, particularly the metabolic syndrome, which we're talking about, altered glucose or altered lipid profile, potentially hypertension, and the initial process of atherosclerosis. And in other areas besides cognition, brain function, visual function, there's an interesting link between the neurofunctional aspect of the eye and the brain, is that they're not only improving vision by protecting from refraction of the lights, but also because they're making the message more effective to the brain and the process of the information more efficient. There has been also studies done in the liver. There's concentrations, higher concentrations. Now, again, lutein and zeaxanthin are found throughout the organs, the heart, the liver, the kidney, pancreas, but they are at higher concentrations, obviously really high concentrations in the macula, higher concentrations in the brain and also in the liver.
You mentioned astaxanthin. What is astaxanthin as a carotenoid? A lot of our listeners may not know. They may know lutein, zeaxanthin, mesozeaxanthin, but they may not know about astaxanthin. And astaxanthin will get a lot of press at times, and then to kind of not see as much of it. But supposedly it has it's much more antioxidant effect than even vitamin C, and it's a very powerful antioxidant that the body needs. If you could mention a little bit about it and its benefits in the skin and maybe some other parts of the body, and where do we get it from?
Absolutely. So astaxanthin is another carotenoid. Is not widely available in our diet. Is very similar to omegas. We can obtain it from algae, for example, sea algae. It has a very good property of antioxidation, and because of their antioxidation properties is being tested for cardiovascular disease that has a lot of inflammation going on with the process of the developing of the atherosclerosis. There's been some studies in the production of astaxanthin that have shown that the chemical modification of the molecule slightly, just to make it more bioavailable or just to make it into the formulation, not modifying it in a chemical way, but the different addition or subtraction of certain certain bonds, for example, or molecules of the compound will make it more, will provide a higher potency of antioxidation. And everything is at a very phase 1 clinical, preclinical level. We haven't seen a big intervention studies with astaxanthin.
Yeah, I mean, astaxanthin is a very interesting compound, and I've read some studies that not that you should try this at home, but if you take astaxanthin, you're less likely to get a sunburn. If you go outside, it help prevent you from getting a sunburn. And I have to admit, for myself, I've used astaxanthin, and it definitely took longer for me to get sunburn and not get sunburn. Of course, I'm not going to sit out in the sun for hours to test it, but even just for the 45 minutes that I'm out there, where in the past I would get sunburn after taking 8 milligrams of astaxanthin for about 6 months, it didn't happen. I mean, it's just an N of 1, but I've read about that. I've read about protecting the skin, so I thought I'd throw that in.
No, carotenoids are help protect and all the properties that we mentioned, and they're highly concentrated in our skin. So I wouldn't have any doubt that that's one of the mechanisms, that the reason why astaxanthin is so important is just the skin accumulates high concentrations of carotenoids in general. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. I haven't seen big studies on sunburns and sun protection with astaxanthin.
You want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, perfect. So after we conducted this study in different formulations, we wanted to understand if the carotenoids will do their effect on their own, or if they needed a synergistic effect with the omegas. And that's where the omegas then are brought into the conversation. Definitely, omegas have a synergistic effect in both bioavailability, so make it easier for the body to absorb carotenoids. Carotenoids are a very difficult molecule to absorb. Any kind of compound that is lipidic, like vitamin D, for example, that's also very trendy at the moment and has shown other very good benefits, have a lot of difficulty in being absorbed throughout our intestines. So the presence of other fats like omega-3, particularly polyunsaturated fatty acids, not saturated fats. Saturated fats will compete for absorption and will decrease the absorption of carotenoids, versus unsaturated fats that synergistically help the absorption of the carotenoids and also the benefits of the carotenoids in both in a synergistic manner. So probably coming back, that's my link then to start talking about the omegas. We have covered this. We've explained why are they called omega-3, 6, and 9, and why they are their dimensional configuration is important, because that allows them to have a specific structure in the cell membrane and hence provide this stability to the cells. We've talked about the 3 important essential omega-3s, and others like the omega-6, and then the health claims. So there's a lot of health claims out there on omegas and the different benefits they have, from cardiovascular disease to brain, Alzheimer's, inflammation, and autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, menopause, epilepsy. As you can see, there's a lot, and I just want to kind of give a larger picture of what's happening. So we can categorize or classify these diseases into mechanisms that are occurring within the diseases. So you can have brain function, and we can talk about cognition and mental health. There is important evidence on depression and anxiety. There are many psychiatrists that are prescribing omega-3s through diet by increasing consumption of fish, oily fish, but also through supplementation. And that is a very good area for supplementation in depression and anxiety, but also for cognition, like in patients with Alzheimer's. And then obviously we have the most and most validated and with more evidence, which are the cardiometabolic diseases for secondary prevention, like we just talked before, about heart attacks and heart failure.
Your eyes and your vision are under attack. Damaging blue light from the sun, your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromicelle technology.
The All Eyes Visual All VRP is a portable vision testing platform that includes visual fields, acuity, color vision testing, pupillometry, and extraocular motility. The visual leverages virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and augmented technologies to enable eye care providers to test for and monitor common eye diseases. Visit alleyes.com for more information. Fitting multifocal contact lenses presents a big opportunity to meet patient needs while growing your practice. Alcon is your partner not only with our innovative portfolio, but through e-learning. Learn to enhance your multifocal strategy today with the Alcon Experience Academy.
OIE Broadcasting is the emerging leader in social media. We use scientific entertainment to drive more patients into your office. Visit oiebroadcasting.com and sign up today.
Since I bought Safe For You, my dad makes me clean his boat.
Es natural y es un buen producto.
Every time I go back to school, my mom always makes sure that I have my Safe For You products. I bring extra, and my roommates certainly don't mind.
It's a good thing I had Safe For You to clean up after this little guy.
When my hands get dry, I like to wash them with Safe For You.
And most importantly, the reason why I buy Safe For You is because it's safe for me and you.